Guest today is a Grammy award-winning singer-songwriter and member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's recorded 31 studio albums over the course of his career, and his latest project, How to Play Guitar and Why, is part instruction manual, part memoir, and available now on Audible. I'm a huge fan of this gentleman. I listened to this instruction manual / memoir, and I absolutely loved it because I have my own fascination with the guitar and with this gentleman and his music. I am thrilled he's with us today. Elvis Costello, welcome. You're one of my favorite people to talk to and one of my all-time favorite artists. So to get to sit here with you and have a thoughtful conversation for 6 hours. Did they tell you it's 6 hours?
Yeah, I brought a little bit of Kendall mint cake to sustain me.
We have a jar you can urinate into at any point.
Thank you.
If that becomes,
well, I carry one all the time anyway.
Well, I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. And it looks sad, Elvis. Yeah. You said splendiferous, and I was listening to, I don't know how to describe it. It's absolutely lovely. How to Play the Guitar and Why. It's available on Audible. And I was listening to it, and it is, of course, because it's you, it's not what one might expect. Yes, you do talk about how one might approach the guitar, but it's also this tone poem about everything. And you write, no surprise, beautifully. And you have such great images in there. And I'm reminded that anytime I go to the UK, if I go to London, especially if I go to Ireland, anybody I talk to has this lovely, lovely way of speaking, and this command.
I think that's really confirmed by watching the movies of Guy Ritchie.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, right.
Seriously.
There's some very creative swearing. You've got to be able to.
Oh my God.
Swear creatively if you live in England.
Yes. Right. Not just the swearing.
And the punching and biting too. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful punching, beautiful biting.
And headbutting.
Yeah. And of course, I've always loved your lyrics and the way they interconnect and the architecture of your lyrics. But listening to this, it's so funny. And you have these great images that stick with me. You talk about the wonders of the E minor chord and how evocative it can be. And then you talk about how it's like the lantern on a miner's helmet in a deep cave. And I thought, okay, damn it, this guy's good. That is exactly what it is.
Well, thank you. I was trying to treat this, I called it a work of comic philosophy. It might be flattering it a little bit to say it's philosophical, but I don't think anybody would trust me to actually give them a music lesson. Just listen to the way I play the guitar. I make the point that it's important to keep the inner idiot alive within yourself, particularly if you're going to play rock and roll guitar. You don't want to know what every note is.
Right.
That's where some of the, they're called happy accidents, not unhappy accidents.
Right.
You want to be able to surprise yourself. Sometimes surprise other people in a bad way by the horrible noise you're making. But the point of this ramble, narrative, whatever you would call it, How to Play the Guitar and Why, is to try and get people past that inhibition to make a mistake that'll lead them to the pleasure of playing a song simply. You can go and study music formally from page 1 of the theory book, and it'll take you very logically through it. But the point I make is that the piano is laid out like a diagram. Mm-hmm. It is a beautiful diagram, and all the order of music and the chaos of music is there at a glance. When you pick up a guitar, much as if you pick up any blown instrument, it's not apparent. It's facing away from you for one thing, so you're always looking at your hands initially. And I'm trying to just prove the point that when you begin in the key of C, which many, many instructional books of my childhood did because they were married to musical theory, you struggle to play that lovely ringing C chord. You get that under your hands, and you immediately encounter the chord of F. And the chord of F is nearly impossible for every novice. And it is, truthfully, as I say in the piece, the reason why the world is not full of happy minstrels, but in fact, I mean, when I say, I don't mean minstrels as in the old horrible sense. I mean strolling players.
Yes.
But is actually filled with sadistic dentists and dictators, and they, all of whom have encountered the chord of F, and it threw them down a path of, they thought this pain that was inflicted on their soul, they were going to inflict on other people evermore.
This is why I thought, when I was listening to this, I thought Elvis is talking directly to me for two reasons. One, I'm a narcissist. So I always think when I listen to a great man or great woman speak that they're speaking directly to me.
And I was, of course.
Yes, I know. It says dedicated to Conan O'Brien, which lovely sentiment. And then the second thing is I took up the guitar probably rather late for most people. I'd started as a terrible drummer, and then I decided when I got out to Los Angeles to start my comedy career. I am in comedy, by the way.
Yes.
Just want to make that clear.
Yes.
I have to tell people all the time because it's not.
No.
It's not apparent.
No.
But
I've warned you about being taller than me.
I know you always say that, but it's what I decided was I need a solo instrument. I need to learn to play the guitar. So I went to Freedom Guitar, which was basically a pawn shop here in Hollywood, and I purchased a 1970s era Yamaha acoustic guitar, and I purchased the Mel Bay chord book.
Well, that's exactly the kind of chord book that I'm talking about,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized I don't want to learn theory. I don't understand theory. Theory scares me. What I want to do is play the songs that I love to hear. And I remember very clearly, if you start in C, you've got to then go to F and then to G.
Yeah.
That's just the way it goes.
That's the three-chord trick that will yield many, many songs.
The problem is, as you point out, F for a novice, and even for if you're not a novice, a proper F requires you to contort your hand in a way that causes it to explode.
It also causes you to exclaim and add three other letters to that initial F. And, that it truthfully does. Frequently followed by hurling the said instrument across the room, dashing it to pieces, which is, as I say, why the world is full of frustrated F'ers.
Yes.
The people that struggle never get further than F. Now, so it seems like I'm giving the game away. I want to take people down the trail. There's lots of other things I say. I want to take people down the trail in how to play the guitar and why. If you sort of imagine yourself learning C and you logically have to find F as the next chord, if you then allow yourself the luxury of learning the chord of G,
yes,
you're immediately ahead of the game, because if you switch to the key of G, the chord of C is that second chord you're going to need.
Yes.
That means you already know it.
Yes.
So you have that wonderful feeling, hey, I'm halfway there. The chord of D is actually a very simple triangle of fingers, probably the simplest chord on the whole fretboard, certainly in the first positions. And at that point, I would say most relatively nimble-fingered people can learn to play that sequence of chords, albeit haltingly. And that's why I recommend that you simply play the guitar for yourself. Maybe watching anything. You could be watching something improving. You could be watching some dreadful history show or something much more sinister or seedy.
Yeah.
But whatever hypnotizes
you. Suggesting pornography?
No, you suggested pornography.
I did,
you
actually
just then.
I just did suggest it.
Nothing could be further.
I don't know what you're doing later.
Nothing could be further from that. But the point being that what you can have your neighbor come and talk to you, particularly if he's a boring person, then you don't really listen.
Right.
You can do anything if you teach yourself just to move your fingers until it becomes natural. One of the things that I had to kind of think of again as I was trying to get to put myself in the mind that I was in when I first learned, assuming that I started in the key of G, and these first two positions were actually relatively simple. It was that mistake that people make, is to lift the whole hand from the guitar in between the chord. You really don't need to do that. You're not about to put it down. Keep your hand just above the strings, and after a while you notice that you your hand will just slip across into that position. And before you know where you are, you're playing music. And my thinking in writing all of this is to find an amusing way of saying, this is actually easier than you think.
Yes.
And then you get to 3 chords, and we get to the wonderful illumination of the minor chord, in the case of G, the E minor that creates the da 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 da. A million songs based on that chord sequence. After that, it's really up to you. It's up to your own curiosity. You might go on to write a symphony, and you might go back and learn all that musical theory. You might take up another instrument, or you might be content with those 3 chords, because so many wonderful songs lie within the 3 or 4 chord range, and add sevenths to color those chords, and gradually your chord inventory, so to speak, will just grow.
And you talk about this in How to Play the Guitar and Why. You reference Hank Williams, one of the great American songwriters of all time. They call him the Shakespeare of the South. And
he's the Shakespeare of everywhere.
Well, Shakespeare may disagree with that. Where is Shakespeare if we say that Hank Williams is Shakespeare?
It's true.
He's fucked.
It's true, but he's long gone. He's not that bothered now. But
you're right. You're right. Right.
Yeah.
Hank is only recently
I do
gone.
think Hank Williams is for everybody. You know, I mean, you have to, as I point out, one of Hank Williams' first national hits was Cold Cold Heart.
Yes.
But it was Cold Cold Heart, a song by Tony Bennett.
Yes.
So he was immediately put himself in. I've always argued when people talk about the Great American Songbook, it's wonderful that we celebrate George Gershwin and Cole Porter, but you can't leave out Willie Dixon. You can't leave out Hank Williams.
Nope.
These are the other American music. You can't leave out Jelly Roll Morton. There's just dozens and dozens of songwriters that we should be grateful they thought of that idea, whatever it is. Hank Williams wrote so many unbelievable songs based on 3 chords. And I chose deliberately a Hank song because it's such an emotional song that I think from the outside, you would imagine it must be more complex musically in order to render this feeling. But I try to strike the balance in writing the piece and then performing it between genuine instruction, which there is a little bit of genuine instruction, and heartfelt feeling for songs like Cold Cold Heart. And I think you mentioned the fact that I'm clearly not American, so I've come to appreciate musicians like Hank Williams, or for that matter, Willie Dixon and countless others from America, from the perspective of somebody who grew up on English radio, musically and comedically. Because I think that I might be right in saying radio comedy remained recognizable in a form that my parents would have known, with just changes of personality. Whereas those same performers in America became television entertainers, because television took hold in America much earlier.
Yes.
So the people who I didn't know anything about when I first came to America, I knew who Lucille Ball was. I knew who Phil Silvers was because I really loved Sergeant Bilko. I had never seen Jackie Gleason until I set foot in America.
Right.
I might have seen his name in a movie cast list, but I didn't know how revered he was from The Honeymooners.
Yeah.
Well, the equivalents of those shows in England were on the radio.
Yes.
So, of course, they contained all of the surreality of much more use of sound effects. What American television comedy achieved with slapstick, they had to achieve with sound effects, which is why I was attracted to writing the score, accompanying myself throughout this piece in the spirit of BBC radio comedy, really.
Well, How to Play the Guitar and Why, you're taking people on this journey that was very inspiring for me, to the point where when you were talking about Cold, Cold Heart and talking about the power of it, I went and got my guitar. It's 3 chords, and played along and realized I could have played this song 3 months into learning the guitar and felt just as powerful and lovely as I do playing it now all these years later. That's how simple it is. And you're playing Hank Williams. The power is all there.
I know. I've never really understood, like why. I mean, some of the songs that they teach you in that kind of play in a day book, which was very common when I was a kid, they weren't very interesting songs, so they didn't push you on.
No.
If it's a song that you really love, you have that desire to find out what the chord is that links those phrases together, and little by little that becomes a way to learn harmony. You know, you start to hear, if you have any kind of natural ear for music, you're going to eventually become curious that you'll try to play a song and the few chords that you do know will not render it. And that's when maybe you have to consult some sort of dictionary of chords, and you little by little start to piece the elements of harmony, which a piano trained student, of course, is taken through. But very few people are taught to play just chord shapes on the piano.
Right.
They're immediately the independence of the hands, playing melody in one hand, bass line in the other, or chords in the left hand, isn't the same as playing the guitar, where you have a choice between learning scales and, say you wanted to be Eddie Van Halen, you could practice and practice and practice till you got as fluid as half the speed of some of the solos that he played. But you could only play that solo at the end of all that study. It wouldn't lead you back to a full song. My method is taking you from the song, and then you eventually you're going to know for yourself whether it's in you to want to be that kind of person that cuts loose and finds those other things higher up the neck of the guitar. That's all very thrilling. That's a different study. That's why I don't go into it that much.
You know, it's funny because I'm reminded that John Lennon and Paul McCartney were steadfast about not wanting people. They didn't want to know what the hell they were doing.
Yeah.
They very much clearly had this incredible facility with music, and they had their 10,000 hours of playing, and they had the ambition and the creativity, but they didn't want to sit down with someone and have them explain musical theory. And yet, look at the body of work is there. So they approached it in the way you're talking about, which is through sheer enthusiasm. Like a song
like Michelle, which has some diminished chords in it, which would be much more common to the language of jazz musicians. They must have, I don't know, maybe because the song had this French theme, maybe they heard some music that contained these other voicings of chord, and it's only one note different, you know, in the chord, and it just opens a door. It is like colors.
Yes.
There are people talking colors when they're talking music. But I tried not to I did sort of try to lay out the musical theory aspect of this in a way that was funny, so that it didn't become indigestible for somebody that simply was curious to know what I felt about it, because the last part of the title is the why they're playing the guitar. Like, some people just like, you look good holding an instrument. You know,
yes.
People will say, well, you know, the piano player's hidden behind a piano. That's not kind of going to help me communicate with people. If you have something that you have to blow through, a saxophone or a trumpet, then you can't sing. You maybe can't you can't really smile while you're playing those instruments. You have to concentrate. You can smile when you take it away from your mouth, but if you're a singing soloist.
Right.
So the guitar is obviously it's the show-off's instrument.
I used to think I was shallow. Well, I am shallow, but I used to really think that I was shallow because when I started on the acoustic, then I got my first electric guitar, which for you nerds out there was a Gretsch Tennessean.
Ooh,
yeah,
pretty fancy.
1964 Gretsch Tennessean that I got for $600 at the time.
Wow.
Which today would be worth a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And it's the same guitar that George Harrison played on their second U.S. tour. But I'll stop there. It goes too far, and it's really sad. But I started to work on that guitar, and then I realized I cared more about the look than the sound of the electric guitar. So I liked a big Gretsch, and people would say, well, do you like the tone? And I'd say, I really don't know. I just know that when I'm holding a big Eddie Cochran Gretsch, I think it looks cool. I don't know what you're talking about with tone.
Well, I did. I can really sympathize with that, because I went a stage further than that when I was a lot younger than I imagine you were, where if you could afford a $600 guitar. My first ever group, I formed with my childhood best friend, like a man who was like a brother to me, Joel Peterson, and we had a group called the Meteors, which consisted of one of us hitting a biscuit tin with knitting needles and the other playing what was a very impressive cardboard replica of a Rickenbacker, or sometimes I'd have a bass modeled on a Hofner, cut out of cardboard boxes, glued together. And then we would hide a record player behind a curtain and we would play Freddie and the Dreamers and mime along to this. This was like a preparation for a life in show business anyway, because half the time on the BBC, they didn't allow you to actually sing when I became a professional musician. So this mime, or lip sync as you call it in America, was a perfect preparation. But it was all about making the cardboard replica, a flat cardboard replica of the guitar. I mean, I hasten to add, I was only 26 when I was doing this, so it's not as pitiful as it sounds. You know? I was.
At the time, you were 52.
Yeah, I was 52 while I was doing it.
And you could afford a guitar, but you had gone quite mad.
I still preferred with the cardboard.
Yeah.
And the cardboard guitars, of course, were not that resilient to the kind of shape throwing, as we call it in, I don't know whether you call it that over here, the kind of shape throwing that one has to affect while playing the guitar. So any kind of posing with the guitar would immediately bend the rather thinner piece of cardboard that had been cut out to fashion the neck. Now, I felt really as if I was in command of the music because I never made any mistakes while doing
You
those
can't.
things. You can't, because the music was
There's no strings.
It was coming from behind a curtain.
Yeah.
But it confirms what you're saying about how good it feels to hold a certain kind of guitar. I remember buying a Gretsch on, I think, my second tour of America. I bought a Gretsch White Falcon, and I thought,
oh my God.
I'll look, all I need is the fringe jacket now, and I'll look just like Neil Young.
Yeah.
And all it did was feed back all the way through the first show that I tried to play it on, and I never played it again. I just immediately went back to the shop. I just couldn't get along with it.
The White Falcon, for anyone listening, and it's going to be a lot of you who don't know, it's Mike Nesmith played one when he was with the Monkees. So if you go back and look at an old Monkees episode, it's this giant white guitar.
Gold fittings and everything.
From a distance, it's gold, and it's got jeweled insets, and it's got a big falcon, and it's the most amazing thing. When you get up close...
It's not going to like a thing with a big falcon on it, you know, like, I mean...
Yeah.
That's the essential part of anything.
Exactly.
Really. Big falcon.
Everything should have a large falcon on it.
Yeah. I always, carry one at all times,
You walked in with a large falcon.
Yeah.
And we immediately subdued it.
Put it in a cage.
But when you get up close and look at those guitars, they're actually very garish. When you get close, it's like seeing a clown, but from like 2 inches away. It's horrifying.
Which is never good.
Never good.
No.
Unless
that's actually a very frightening childhood memory. You've just summed up now. In fact, I have to leave. I think maybe I was attracted to it because my first electric guitar was a Vox, and it wasn't a cool Vox either. It was the name Vox attached to this Les Paul copy I bought in Frank Hesse's shop, which is quite a famous shop for people. Beatles fans will know that.
Yes.
That will know this name. It sort of lurks in the Beatles mythology because it's where George Harrison bought his first guitar, I think. When I lived in Liverpool in the early 70s, I would go there and try all the guitars on the rack, even the ones I couldn't afford. They had this Rickenbacker that used to have a white card stuck between the strings, said, formerly owned by George Harrison. And I would occasionally pluck up the courage to ask to play it, even though I couldn't afford it. And it would disappear as if it was bought by people. And I think in the end, I got just good enough on the guitar to recognize that it was a really horrible guitar. It was a Rickenbacker, but there was a good reason why George had got rid of it. It was just not a good one.
So you think it's true? You think it did belong to George?
Oh, I think it probably did, but he probably would say, you know what, Frank, take this back. And I bought this Vox for exactly those reasons. It had fake gold fittings.
Yes, the look.
It weighed a ton.
The look.
It sounded absolutely horrible. And, I struggled on that for a number of years until I found a combination of a clip-on pickup with an acoustic guitar that actually sounded funkier than my actual electric guitar. And
you ended up, I think what's very hard to do, you really know you've made it when you can name the artist and name their guitar, and the two go together. It's Lennon, the Rickenbacker, and it's McCartney, Hofner, and it's, Brian Jones and that white teardrop Vox, and you and the Fender Jazzmaster, like just that guitar. whenever I see anybody with that guitar, I think, what are you doing with Elvis Costello's guitar?
I that's very nice of you to say, but I think I have to give credit. I was playing I graduated to a Telecaster. I had a friend who worked for a Fender showroom and managed to get me a little bit of discount on a Fender. And I played a brand new Fender for a long while, which wasn't, again, not a very good guitar. And I saw this Jazzmaster in a secondhand shop, covered in furniture varnish. It was very unattractive in its original appearance. And I had seen a guitar player from Cincinnati, Ohio, called Danny Adler, who was playing in a group in London at the time. And he impressed me because he could play the guitar part from Clean Up Woman, the Betty Wright record, Little Beaver, the guitar player from Miami. And I'd never heard anybody play that kind of funk kind of rhythm guitar so well in person. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a different kind of sounding thing. It's got so I have to credit him really as the person that I saw play it first. I think you'd get a few people who would lay claim to that guitar other than me. Tom Verlaine of Television played one. I know that Fender put out several models named for artists long before they got around to remaking my one. I mean, it was only about 10 or 12 years ago that they made a small run. But I think really the mistake that they made was to recreate my guitar with its original, can I say, shit brown furniture varnish look. It sounded actually really good, but it looked like hell, and I don't really see any young kids, what I really need a guitar that's going to make me look cool. I think I'll have one that looks like the color of a roadkill, that's what it
exactly.
looks like.
I want a fecal look to my guitar.
Yeah, that's what's going to make me a hit with the girls and the boys.